Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to a wonderful Wednesday webinar with the Climate Emergency Centre Network. Ever growing number of centres now, about 36, I think, around the country. We're using vacant shops on the high street to create climate, community, and social hubs. Tonight, we've got Alan Gray from Zero Hour Campaign, amazing campaign, reaching out all across the UK to raise awareness. He's talking about one of their new campaigns. Secure Your Future campaign, which obviously we all need to do. In particular, there's some reference here to the Nature and National Security Bill Alan's going to tell us more about. Let's all get behind it, network it, and get out to as many people as possible. Over to you, Alan. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks so much. Yeah, so as Phoenix said, my name's Allan. I'm from Zero Hour, the organisation behind the Climate Nature Bill. And today, which I'm going to just try and share my screen, I'm going to be covering a sort of a bit. Essentially, it's an umbrella for the series of work that we're doing. So let me just bring it up. How do I? Oh, sorry, I'm having.
That's okay. We
My computer is always doing all sorts of interesting things, but I think it's going to cooperate.
I guess it's a very busy computer. Here we are. The screen's changing for us. There we go. Yeah.
Okay, can you see that okay?
Yeah, maybe put it into major viewer bit, but yes, that's okay. We can see most of it, but we can see the slides at the side.
Okay, let me see if I can do it where it shows only that. How do I do this? Single
Hide sidebar, maybe.
possibly.
Okay.
Let me just be 1 second and let's just
It's okay.
oh there this looks like it. No. Okay, maybe I'll just go with this and
Yeah, it's okay. We can see
we'll
most
see
of
how
that.
we go. So
Mhm.
the umbrella of what we're trying to do is in many ways a response to reports that have come out that that's likely many of you have been speaking about at lots of your screenings, and it's partly a response to what was in the People's Emergency Briefing screenings. So the umbrella of our work we call Secure Your Future. It aims to cover some of the aspects that are coming up. Obviously, the whole climate nature crisis is so enormous that it's very difficult to cover it all. But this is what we're focusing on and our sort of diagnosis of the problem. So I'm going to start with a quick diagnosis of where we think the major issues are, and then speak about how we're going to try and resolve and provide solutions. So the first one is the breakdown of nature. Many people know about this report, the Joint Intelligence Committee report by MI5 and MI6 called the Global Biodiversity Loss, Ecosystem Collapse and National Security Report. Obviously, we've only seen a very short version of this report, but even in those pages, it's really worrying about the basic fundamentals of our way of life. So food security, health, what are we actually facing because of nature loss in particular. So we have, that's where that restoring nature comes from. A lot of people talk about halting nature loss, but given that we're, as many of you know, one of the most nature depleted group of countries in the world, halting is barely doing anything. Actually, it's the nature restoration that we need, and this is deeply connected to what we're facing with the climate crisis, which I'll go into in a little bit. The most obvious statement in the world, but many reports have said this, that we need to end oil and gas to meet our climate targets. I've highlighted this report just because it's one that gives a very direct address to this point. The International Energy Agency mapped out the pathways for 1.5, and they have said all the way back in 2021 and then again in 2023, and then they've reinforced it again recently, that there is no pathway with expanding oil and gas that allows us to meet climate targets, not just internationally but nationally also. So even our carbon budgets is at threat. And then I'm really glad that someone mentioned this in their intro, but we also diagnose the fact that people right now are facing a heat wave. Communities are facing flooding. Communities like where I live are facing wildfires. So we need a plan for adaptation to protect communities right now for the impacts that are already affecting people. So these three pillars is why we focused on restoring nature, protecting communities, and ending oil and gas. And as I'll cover as I go into each of these are things that directly mentioned in people's emergency briefings, which is helpful because it means that when you come out of that screening, it is a direct thing that you can take one of these themes away for what those briefings were saying as a solution and put it into action with people in Parliament. So yeah, restoring. I'm going to start with restoring nature. Thankfully, many of you will sort of have heard of this, but if you haven't, I'm going to give you the very quick rundown, but I will share a briefing which gives lots of technical information on what this legislation is. So it's called the Nature and National Security Bill, and as the sort of name suggests, it is essentially trying to find a pathway for restoring nature in order to be an ally to our climate objectives, also to protect communities and also to deliver what the government's already wanting to do, which is how do you actually protect communities from the impacts they're already feeling, and also create jobs while doing it. And our legislation that we launched earlier this year is supported by Wildlife and Countryside Link, National Trust, the Wildlife Trust, Rebuilding Nature, and many other organisations. We did lots of consultation after that Joint Intelligence Committee report on essentially what does this look like? What's the response to this looking like? And when we seen that the full report didn't look like it was going to get unveiled, we knew that lots of parliamentarians had seen the full details. So we got to work and started talking about what could a solution, and we came up with this legislation. I'm not going to cover it in every bit of detail. It's a big piece of legislation and we do have a big briefing on it, but I'm going to try and cover the main crux of it for people that it's new. So one of them, you probably heard, some of you might have even remembered this line from the film itself, about categorizing nature as critical infrastructure. So actually starting to view nature not as a nice to have that we should hit targets of, but actually looking at it being funded and viewed by the Treasury in the same way that we look at things like roads as in critical infrastructure for our day-to-day life. So yeah, it's actually how do you categorize nature protection projects as nationally significant infrastructure projects. It allows to streamline decision making, to try and coordinate the delivery of joint up nature networks, and actually unlocking the adequate investment that's needed to do this on such a large scale. And that obviously comes with co-benefits. The co-benefits, we have a report that we released 2024 maybe, called A Nature Rich UK, which was looking at lots of evidence of how much job creation can be we can benefit from through nature restoration. And this is at that time we were looking at as an alternative to entirely tech-based solutions. We know that the carbon budget delivery and growth strategy is very heavily dependent on carbon capture and storage, but actually the job potential of not only restoring nature but also sequestering carbon is much greater in nature restoration projects, and it also spreads all across the UK rather than being focused in particular localities. But I will share a full briefing on that gives lots of information on this. And this legislation is also part of our solution around protecting communities, which feels very real right now. People feeling the health impacts, premature deaths because of heat, businesses being affected by flooding, air quality being affected by wildfires. A big focus is how do we protect people right now for the impacts that are already baked in to do with inaction that we've already faced. And this obviously goes across party lines. You know, in terms of how people are being protected, these are things people are already feeling. So it's how do we create a plan? So in the Nature and National Security Bill, we are essentially trying to address these problems. We recognise that the Climate Change Committee recently revealed a report about how underprepared we were. So recognizing we're unprepared for the climate we're facing, the impacts of climate nature, our buildings physically aren't built for the heat that we're now facing, as many of you will be feeling even today. So we know that adaptation must be a priority for this government. So yeah, this references that report of the report says that there is not a single category where there is good delivery on adaptation currently. So this should be a priority that I'll just outline how we try and deliver. So in that legislation, we are proposing that there should be a commissioner, a resilience and adaptation commissioner that looks across all aspects of government, looking at how is preparing for these impacts. We recognise this will not sit in one place. This needs to be a role that recognises that this will have mitigations and actions that are taken for housing, for health, for land, for water, for the energy we have. They will all come under this. How do we plan? Because as we know, when we have extreme heat that we face, basic infrastructure can collapse. Actually, the railways won't run. It does not neatly sit somewhere. So having someone who's commissioner, this resilience and adaptation commissioner, can sit across all aspects of government, ensuring that, given the CCC have said we're unprepared, how do communities actually have what's in place and the planning for impacts that might come in 2, 3, 5, 10 years' time. And holding government to account on when they are moving forward very quickly without recognising the adaptation funding that is needed for different areas and their particular needs. And the most pressing thing that we have right now is what's going on with oil and gas. And we are focusing quite a lot on how do we support the actions of the Stop Rosebank campaign. I will go at the end, which is only a few slides away, on the actions that we are suggesting people can take in order to progress these things. But with Stop Rosebank, we've created a dedicated tool which we continue to update with new templates to keep sending messages to your MP to speak out. We also have something which is brand new, which is we have a petition directed at the future Prime Minister, which includes a call to reject Rosebank, but also includes actions on meeting our international obligations on climate and nature, and creating time so that we can advance the Nature and National Security Bill. And many of you probably know about this. This was shared by the Stop Rosebank team recently, but Parents of the Future have a banner action which Zero Hour will be helping promote, where you can order a free placard banner. And they will be doing actions all across the UK, and you can add your action to a map similar to the People's Emergency Briefing to demonstrate how many communities across the UK are concerned by this. So that's the sort of three pillars of that sit under this Secure Our Future. It's about how do we restore nature, how do we protect communities through adaptation, and how do we get back on track with climate by making sure that projects like Rosebank don't go ahead. And a new Prime Minister is a really great opportunity for us to actually it's a change of lots of department roles. It gives us the chance to lobby new people in those departments. And this moment right now, before they're all selected, is a great moment to lobby them. So our four sort of key asks that we've got ongoing before I'm very happy to answer questions on all these specifics. But as we said, we have this petition, this pledge for the Prime Minister. This would take 20 seconds to sign, and I'll share it in the chat. An additional thing is what Zero Hour is generally known for, is this connection between activism and the halls of power, because we have a caucus, a cross-party group that's in Parliament, so we have a mechanism to raise questions and put pressure. So asking your MP to back the Nature and National Security Bill, we have a tool directly for this. This is a really good way to start to get them to understand there is a government report, the Joint Intelligence Committee report, and experts have come together and said this is an adequate response to what that should look like. It forces their hand in many ways, because if they say we don't think this is the plan, your natural response becomes, what should the plan be then? What are you actions you're going to take? And it allows you to sort of set them your relationship to MPs, where you actually say, I'm giving you two different pathways to take. You can either outline a detailed plan, or you can support a plan that's already made, and it at least starts that conversation. I'll just touch on this, but lobbying your MP to stop Rosebank is a really big decision. It'll probably be the biggest barometer test of a Burnham government. This decision is expected quite early in his time. There's a lot of rumours that it will get approved, and this is the moment before he goes into that role, selects his cabinet, to lobby as much as possible. Many of people are probably like me, who've been lobbying on this for a long time. But yeah, that last push is going to be really essential. And we do have a crowdfunder to help continue all of this work we have. I recognise I've just thrown a load of information at you, but I am here in case you have burning questions on this. One question which I know will probably come up for anyone that knows our climate and nature work, so I might just preempt it, which is, we obviously did take the climate and nature bill through to a debate in Parliament. The reason why... essentially, we've changed tact, not away from the bill, but away from introducing the bill in its entirety, which is why we've looked at these umbrellas. Because as a private member's bill ballot, one of the pushbacks we had was the enormity of all of the different components of it. So we are essentially campaigning on all of those key objectives by taking them into different actions and different proposals. But those objectives remain the same objectives, which is why it's in the pledge to the Prime Minister, international commitments. But yeah, that's the top level. But I am happy to go into anything else that people might have.
Thank you very much, Alan. That was absolutely fantastic, and thank you for all the massive amount of work you and all the Zero Hour team have been doing on these campaigns and these bills. And you've really you've built a whole looking for the right word, but a networking machine of lots of really active people all across the country that are really working hard on this and other bills. So thank you so much for that. So folks, if you've got a question or a comment or a feedback, there's a heart-shaped react button down the bottom that you can raise your hand like that, and then we can see who is 1, 2, 3 if you want to give me a comment or a question. So Alan, the latest bill, is there a timeline to that? And just a little bit of a question about how you organise. There was a lady I met one of the campaigns a few years ago, and she used to be a Labour Party advisor to an MP, and she knew exactly how Parliament worked. And they had. So my question really is the Restoring Nature and National Security Bill. Is there a timeline for that? And so people get behind that and try and get their MPs. Is that a private members? Is that a main one? How, what's the timeline for that and how we can support? And I suppose the other one, what this lady did, she knew the parliamentary system, and she designed something for one of her campaigns where everyone could literally email the MPs at the right time before and even when they were going close to voting, and reminder emails, and she really worked the parliamentary system. You want to say a little bit more about that and how you organise to influence MPs? Over.
Yeah,
And then
absolutely.
Gordon, then Polly. Over.
Yeah, so the answer to that question is we have a you don't often see them on camera. They're too busy often for these calls, but we have a whole parliamentary team who are directly working inside Parliament. So they know lots of MPs directly. They are meeting with MPs' offices to understand what the barriers, what their concerns are. We also run a thing that's called the Climate Nature Crisis Caucus, which is a cross-party group, which is bringing those people together to have discussions on adaptation in particular. And they will know key conversations that are happening in the background, but they will also know where the opportunities and where the barriers are to particular actions. So we so the timeline of it is essentially we want it to be in this time of Parliament. Now, we tried to get it as a private member's bill ballot, but because we just launched the bill, that became a very big ask because we were going from launching the bill to straight into a new session of Parliament. So we had lots of lobbying. We actually had thousands and thousands of emails going to the people in the top And we even had some of those MPs recording videos and thanking campaigners for that lobbying, although they didn't choose it as their, because they only get one opportunity to decide
Mhm.
their bill. But our plan now, there is an opportunity with the sort of change of roles in government. So we're trying to utilise through our parliamentary team, how do we have leverage with the relationships we have to try and essentially get as much Labour buy-in for this as we can. Now, given that DEFRA had this briefing ahead of Labour getting into government on food security, and then there was a joint intelligence committee, we have that information that they've been briefed on.
I think he's frozen. Is it just for me
So
or?
Okay, thank you, OJ.
was
I thought
held
it was mine.
another 0 hour
Okay.
secured an annual.
Okay, Alan, you just froze there. We'll carry on, but if it happens again, you might want to remove your video. We're
Okay,
okay.
can you hear
Okay.
me now?
Yep, we can hear you
Okay.
now. Gordon, then Polly, then Jen Atkinson. Gordon, go for it.
Hello, good evening, Alan. We keep on hearing about government talking about opening up Rosebank. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It gets very confusing. And the counter argument is that we're importing oil from Norway. Is that true?
Yeah, no, really good question. And the reason it keeps coming and going is because the decision is sort of pending. So it was tabled, it was then challenged in court, and the developer had to resubmit their application to speak about the full impacts of the project. Now, the argument that's being made is exactly as you said, which is if we're importing, why don't we just use our own? Now, there's a few, it is true, what you're saying is true. We are predominantly importing oil and gas. The thing that's not being said is the fact that that wouldn't change if we approved Rosebank. So Rosebank is predominantly for export, and it wouldn't, even if it was approved, it wouldn't be enough to tip the balance of scales of us not being a net importer. We've been a net importer for a few decades, so our dependency on imports remains the same, even if we were to approve Rosebank. So the thing that we're essentially trying to say is that the thing that replaces our dependency on oil and gas is obviously a faster transition towards renewables, and Rosebank does help our supply because we don't have the capacity to refine the oil that we would take out in Rosebank. So it's majority for export. So if this was nationalized and it was our oil and we had our own refinery, you would be much closer to that being to the media's sort of argument on that being true. But they're essentially telling us half of the story and not telling the other part, which is we are dependent on import, but Rosebank doesn't have the quantity to replace that dependency on imports, and it also is for export predominantly. With it's about 80% is for export from Rosebank, and it's a private company, so that money stays in their pocket.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, nice, good question, Gordon. Polly Henderson, then Jen Atkinson, and anyone else pop your hand up?
Yeah,
Polly.
this is a comment more than a question. I'm finding it, when who's Allan was mentioning, oh, they're only telling half the story. I see in many contexts where we're talking about climate emergency that all the emphasis is put on reducing oil and gas or cutting oil and gas, and very little emphasis is placed on cutting meat and dairy as from our diets. I know this is a very personal thing, but especially when we're talking about nature restoration, I don't see how that's possible without a massive change in how we eat, because most of the land in the UK seems to be used for livestock, or to just the amount of fields feeding livestock. I'm sure we all know the arguments. I don't need to go into them. So it's just a comment to say it would be nice to see that flagged up a bit more.
Yeah. I'll very quickly just say, yeah, no, totally agree. And Paul Behrens, who speaks directly on the need for a reduction in meat and dairy for land reform in order for us to restore nature, in the People's Emergency Briefing, helped shape this bill and supports it. So yeah, absolutely, it's a really good point to take on board, which is absolutely critical. Is we will not be able to restore nature at that scale without that, you know, cow in the room, as to use a pun, but
Yes.
Sorry, that pun took a second and then kicked in. Lovely, good questions. Good to keep these things in mind. And we need system change and paradigm shifts in consciousness and in diets. Jan Atkinson, then Oliver Sterno. Over.
Hi, hi. I was interested when you mentioned about the parliamentary team you have. Myself and a few others have got a meeting with Maria Eagle next week, if she doesn't cancel again. I have absolutely no faith in her at all. Whenever I've emailed her, it doesn't matter what the topic, I just get the bog standard reply.
Sorry, Jan, who's Marie Eagle? Is that your MP?
She's the MP for, they keep changing the boundaries, Liverpool, Garston.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a big patch now. And the group I'm in, they've done a number of film screenings in Liverpool, and 2 Liverpool MPs have attended, which was really good. And we're trying to organise one in the area where I live and see if we can get Maria Eagle to attend. I just wondered, are there any tips that might convince her?
yeah, and I could speak forever on this, but I'll maybe email you. But yeah, one of the biggest things is that emails in particular are emailed by often their members of staff, and they just have stock responses. The in-person, and as I said, I'll put my email to go into this in detail, but it's about preparing a soft and a harder ask. So a soft ask that isn't them committing to legislation, but committing to doing something. So it could be going to a screening, it could be reading the briefing, could be joining the Climate and Nature Crisis Caucus to hear more, and it allows you to have a follow-up meeting. Because if you feel like they've heard your argument, they won't meet with you again. But if they feel like there's a continued follow-up, there's always an open door. But I'm just going to put my email in the chat, because I'm happy to follow up and potentially even provide a bit of a briefing on what we know, where she's motivated by. So we can provide that if that's helpful.
That would be fab. Thank you.
Good one. Okay, Oliver Sternos next, then Maria Huff.
Hello, thank you. The inflated plastic elephant in every room is to do with the big oil companies. I went to a conference by the United Nations Association, Southeastern London group, and they talked about lots of stuff, but they never mentioned petrochemicals once. And I think we should focus a lot more on that influence. There is actually a barrier there. The influence from that group of people is acting as a barrier. Whatever in initiative we set up, they put up barriers to progress. And if they find that we're being effective, they will try and do everything they can to stop us. What's your comment about that?
Yeah, no, well, I'll start by saying I absolutely agree. When we look at their influence directly in government, so this isn't just about Labour, this is about the previous government too. It's almost every day there is someone from the fossil fuel lobby meeting with them. They're also often behind the misinformation that we hear. So when we hear about the arguments for, let's say, the planning infrastructure bill, or we hear arguments around rejecting carbon budget 7, all of these debates, you can tie back to where that influence of money is. Now, what's really difficult about breaking that down is actually having this is why the People's Emergency Briefings is so good, is because it's how do you get a critical mass where you start to be able to dissipate that moment of, it's not even doubt, it's just that moment of questioning, of like, so that there's more people in your community saying, I'm going to look into whether that's true or not. So there's definitely that. There is an aspect of and this is something that I will give a lot of credit, because calls like this are really useful for, and Phoenix, you're really good at this, is how do you share resources between each other? Because one of the things that's really uniting between the oil and gas lobby is that they have a united front. They coordinate how they're going to, what their arguments are going to be in the response, and they're very focused. They won't focus on all of the arguments at once. They will focus on right now. It's we're too, the UK, would you rather have your own supply or import? Now that's their big argument. They're pushing it and it's everywhere. But later on it'll be something about, solar is not efficient, and then you'll see that everywhere. And that isn't an accident, it's coordinated. And it's how do you have things that are coordinated? Like right now there's a big moment around Stop Rosebank. The next moment, it's how do you actually bring lots of that coordination? And the Climate Coalition do a lot of this work. The other thing is actually how do we get, and this is, I don't know how we do this, but it's how do you get more philanthropy in to fund the voices that are saying the right thing, because NGOs are always going to struggle with things like, how do you get the same level of media coverage? And NGOs are already struggling with multiple press releases. But if you have people who are funding the actual broadcaster, like if you've got people funding GB News, you're always going to be fighting that. But the People's Emergency Briefing gives us the opportunity to fight in a different place, which is how do you do that on social media, and how do you do that in village halls, and how do you have that on a human level too? But so I don't quite have the full answer, but you're absolutely right with that influence, and part of it comes from collaboration. How do you bring resources in the sector under a unified message rather than here's all of the things we need to solve at one moment?
Thank you.
I think you said I could jump in next.
Sorry, yes, go for it. I was muted. Go for it, Mira. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I had a really interesting evening last 2 weeks ago, talking to Ron Bailey about his long time in campaigning like this, and then I've just been reading his book, and it just talks about the so many different stages you need to go through over like generations of parliaments and generations of bills and reshaping stuff. And I recognise that's what I've been hearing from Zero Hour for sort of several years, is that there's shifting sands the whole time as to what the asks are. And I wondered if there's any way that you can show that actually we got it this far in the early day motions, we got it this far in the private members bill, then we then split it, the government then said this, we're now taking everything forwards in this way, whether that would be putting too many cards on the table, or whether it would really help people like me realise that this is succeeding. Because at the moment, sometimes it feels like it's not succeeding. Sometimes it's feeling like it's, you're playing whack-a-mole. But I don't know if you can make that visual, or just recommend everybody reads his book to say, are we making progress? Yes, it's called dozens of different things, but it is actually progress.
Absolutely. And I'll start by saying Ron is, for people that don't know who Ron Bailey is, he's incredible. He holds the record as a private citizen for passing the most amount of private members' bills. So he has been in this game for a long time, and it was an advisor in our campaign. So when we're making strategic decisions, he will directly work with the Parliament team to say, this barrier is common, you need to push through it, or this barrier will, I've been here before many times, they have essentially closed the doors on you, which allows us to sort of pivot politically. Your suggestion, actually, naively, I'd never thought of, but I think is a brilliant idea of how do we visualize how we have navigated that system, so people realize actually it's a bit of a game of aim high, and you have concessions that help you to take another step, right? So a really good example of this is we now, as a team, will have meetings with DEFRA and DESNES because we got to that second reading. We made such a storm that those departments are like, what do these what do they want exactly? What do they think that isn't there? And then they will meet with us. Another one is now an annual event, the Climate Nature Statement, where now people across the House, so anyone's MP, can ask a direct question in a dedicated event every year on progress on climate, which we've never had. The first one was last year. And obviously people try and force these moments, but I think it's a really good suggestion. I will, if it's not in the chat already, I'll put a link to how you can order a copy. You can order a copy by emailing Ron. He would really be grateful. Very quickly, I'll try and be short with this, but his book basically is a chronicle of basically of why how Parliament works and why sometimes it doesn't. So we can sometimes it's people being incompetent, but sometimes it's actually the system is designed not to have big radical change built in. And he is really, really good at sort of going into real examples of where is the barrier to this? Why did this moment happen? Because we can just look at it and think they just said no, but sometimes it's a little bit more complicated, and it helps understand why Parliament is the way it is, in good and bad ways. But it's a really brilliant book. I'm in the middle of it now.
Does that help there, Maria?
Yeah, no, that would help me. I'm a very visual person with that kind of a map. And if it wouldn't damage the campaign, I'd love to see that kind of chronicle of where and how that's going. And I did mention this webinar to Ron, and he said maybe we could persuade him to come along and talk here as well.
Oh,
brilliant. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that leads to my next point. So if you want to extend the invite, we would love him to do a webinar. And I suppose while I wait for any other hands to pop up, so use the heart-shaped reaction if you want. I've got a couple of points I'd like to throw in there. So yeah, do put your hands up if you want, folks. But how Parliament works. We have a 19th century system that I did politics A level, but it's not very clear how our system works. We have an unwritten constitution that seems to be pulled out of different centuries as they choose to prorogue Parliament or do whatever it is. We need clearer understanding of how the system actually works with the different committees and voting and all the rest. And it needs reform. It needs massive change, really. But if there was a guide that could be written for campaigning for the campaigning movement of movements to understand Parliament better and how to apply pressure in certain areas to get what we want. Because as you were saying, the fossil fuel empire, they understand very well completely exactly how Parliament works. When we occupied Parliament Square years ago, against the illegal wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, this lady came to do a workshop on lobbying, and she said, if you remove the 19th century buildings around the square, behind them there's these big shiny offices, and they're full of lobbyists. And these lobbyists, you think that you vote once every 5 years and you get these people in, but what has the most influence is lobbyists get meetings with ministers and say, we'll give you a £2 million job when you leave, DEFRA or the energy thing. And they lobby very hard and they understand how the system works. So that's what we're up against. We're up against a, entrenched, very well funded billionaire, multi-billion fossil fuel empire that knows how this system works. So how do we use people power to organize back? One of the things that participatory democracy is something we're working on with this cooperating system. And I went to the Lewis Festival of Democracy at the weekend and had a chat with Dinah, who's Lewis Climate Hub, who's a Green councillor, and also with the local MP who was there, James McCleary, Lib Dem guy, very nice. And he actually he said, I'm struggling. I'm working in this system that it's very difficult. I want to represent and be in my local constituency, but I have to go to Parliament quite a few days of the week, and I don't get to do what I want to do because there's this 19th century system run like a bit like a private boys' school, and I find it very difficult, he was saying, and we need some change. And he was saying he would be really interested in more participatory democracy so that local people could vote up things that they wanted that can then go to the MPs or the council and they can decide what they would like to prioritize, kind of thing. So how is there a guide that has anyone produced? Could Ron Bailey help? Could Zero help to how our Parliament actually works and how to effect change more effectively? What do you think, Alan?
There is some that are quite good, but they're on very particular moments. So there's very good guides on what is a private member's bill ballot, how does that work. There is one which is sort of how does legislation change, and there's another one which is sort of how do committees work. So like if you're like if someone's on the net zero and climate committee, it's like, well, what are they doing there? Like how does that actually influence what the government's thinking? So there isn't a sort of an overall playbook, but in a way Ron's book is a very long-winded explanation of how that works. But if we can help do a shorter hand one, even just an FAQ of like, what is this thing? Why doesn't this thing work? I think it's really good. And I think you're totally right in terms of the people who know how the system works, they play the system, and it leaves everyday constituents being like, oh, this is just, it's moving too fast and I don't understand this term. And I think it's designed intentionally to do that. The same with green carding, you know. The idea that you can green card your MP in Parliament, and they are free, they are sort of required to come and give you an answer. But if you go to their constituency office, they're not. It is an explanation of there's just for context. I live in the very north of Scotland, so it's absolutely ridiculous that they say, well, if your MP isn't responding to you, get a train down to London and green card him. It's like, well, not everyone can do that. But I could go down to his office that's 6 miles away and then say, no, I need a meeting, like, and expect one, rather than saying, well, he's not free.
I suppose it's things like this that we only find out the more people actually have time and energy, and a lot of people don't, resources, spare time to find out about the system. I only found out about green carding when they were criminalising residential squatting, when there was a big campaign and we went in, said you can green card your MP, you go physically to there and you say, this is my local MP, I'd like to see him. And sometimes if they're not busy enough, folks, they'll come down and see you because they think it's worth a vote or two, kind of thing. But if there was one handbook that really explained how all the committees worked, how the votes worked, and it really is a system that's been drip fed through to us from the chartists and the suffragettes and the union, slowly we've been given back a few more rights and a few more people. Just for a little bit of history, there in 1649, when we won the English Civil War, the Levellers and the Diggers campaigned before that for all men and all women to have the vote. They dropped the bit about all women having the vote because they thought it was too radical. And when they won, that was before the Civil War. And then when they won, there was the Putney debates, and they made a vote that all men over a certain age should have the vote. And Cromwell turned up the next day and said, no, this is null and void. I wasn't here. If all men had the vote, it would be chaos, kind of thing. So we've just been given little bits, and we need to change this whole system very, very fast. I'm a big fan of let's accelerate the participatory democracy in all areas very quickly. Over to Sally Panifex. So let's try and get short guide Allan to the way Parliament works. Sally, over.
So yeah, just on that point, I think it's so archaic and outdated. Rather than working out how it works, why don't we just come up with something much more user-friendly, succinct, transparent, that utilizes all the digital stuff that we've got? Because I think they like to distract us with these, complicated red tape shit shows, and we're clever enough and the urgency is there that we need something much more accessible. And I think the younger generation, particularly, they've got so much to lose, but probably lots to come up with what a better solution might be.
I think it's an absolutely essential point, and there's so many organizations that recognize that. Not only is it possible, but lots of other governments are already doing much more inclusive and participatory systems. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that, and I think it is something that we, touch wood, should be in luck with being able to lobby Andy Burnham on, because he's been speaking about things like PR and people's assemblies for a long time. So he's openly said, and I think he said even in this campaign, that he believes it should be in the next the next manifesto going in. So after the next election, they will then introduce the idea of, if they got re-elected, they would look at PR. So there's lots of organizations doing really good work by recognizing that the system isn't made to pass really radical stuff. And it's a bit of like two ways of thinking, but we can definitely help with explaining how it currently works, and we can definitely, like, just from an individual perspective, I can share some resources of people that are doing really good work around what practical legislation could you pass that would change how we do democracy? Because obviously that's the difficulty, is the old system has to agree to the new system. So you have to sort of almost introduce it as legislation. And if they're going to be introducing legislation on PR or things like that, that's a way you can have amendments saying, well, what does that look like, and how do we have a say in what that looks like, and should people's assemblies be part of how you inform what the alternative voting system looks like?
So it's that one of I think the old phrase is turkeys don't vote for Christmas. Whichever government gets in has won on the first past the post system. But if Andy's saying he wants to bring in proportional representation, that's a good start.
In theory, yeah, that is true. But in theory, this should be and I say this in theory. In theory, this should be the easiest moment for electoral reform to happen, because Reform campaigned on electoral reform and PR. So did the Greens. Now Andy Burnham has. So it's like it's potentially Conservatives only that are opposing it. So if there's any moment to say trust in politics is breaking down, we need to change the voting system, it should be now. And that starts a conversation about participation, right? Once you speak about how do you vote, then you can speak about how do they participate between votes. Because that's my biggest pet hate, and it's the same. I live in Scotland. It's the same in how do we change the way that Scottish Parliament also works, in terms of not having this idea that now we're all going to be lobbying MPs all between elections, but most people don't. Most people wait to an election, think about who they like, lobby for them, and get disappointed. And we need to start encouraging how do we make it easier for people to day interact with the system. And it's the same even on a local council level. There's so much to be done.
It's interesting, this cooperating system. We've been Peter came to the Convergence, and we're trying to get some funding and support for it. But he did a pilot project of 80 schools in Swansea, and they'd go in at 8 a.m. in the morning and teach some of the brightest kids. Just spend half an hour explaining this participatory democracy system. They would then explain it to a class of 30 people. 30 other kids, and then they would work through the day doing this participatory democracy thing. This is 8-year-olds working the system out, and they would vote up different proposals that they liked and then you can form working groups to make the different proposals. But he said one of the results from 80 schools they did it with was that the kids actually voted to get rid of first past the post voting and to bring in participatory democracy. And when I made that comment to another lady I was speaking to in the last month, she said, yeah, really, it's a no-brainer. I always thought when I was a kid, why don't they just have a television with the things that people could vote on, and then you could just press a button on the television kind of thing to put up what you want. We have the technology now, ladies and gentlemen, that even Boomtown, very popular youth festival, 68,000 people coming. They are showcasing, experimenting. 2 years ago, they had these little iPads on sculptures that you could vote for different mayors and things in the 12 different sectors. This year they're doing a major project to push participatory democracy to 68,000 festival goers. So there is new systems possible. We need to come into the 21st century and make them happen. Dave, do you want to make your point? I can't quite read that all just at the moment. Or anyone else last question or comment, or we'll go first.
Yeah, I can make the point.
MP Watch, Dave.
Yeah, so next Tuesday is a debate on the representation of the people bill, and Alex Sabel, who's a Labour MP, Leeds Labour MP, has put in an amendment calling for a national commission on electoral reform, which is Amendment NC 31, and that would begin the full review of the voting system. If we can get any more MPs to support that, it would be really helpful. So 160 have signed up so far to support that amendment, but the more we can do, the better, and the more chance we've got of. I don't think it'll go straight to a form of proportional representation without this commission. So we want that commission to get in place, and then we've got a chance that possibly before the election or maybe it'll be made as in their manifesto next time. But immediately before the last general election, Andy Burnham happened to be in our constituency, and I asked him specifically about the fact that lots of the Labour MPs, if they were going to win, were going to be relying on people voting tactically in order to support them, and that they couldn't rely on that in the future, and therefore PR was the only way to go. And he said that he had actually completely changed his mind on PR as a result of what happened in the 2015 national election, where UKIP got lots of votes but didn't get hardly any representation. And he thinks that directly led to Brexit, the Brexit vote. And he changed his mind away from first past the post. So I shall remind him of that.
That's very good, Dave. Thanks for that. MP watching another update. There's a little thing we're trying to introduce now in recent webinars, call to action after the webinar. Obviously, action is many different things, from jumping on bulldozers to signing petitions to taking action in many different ways. What is there a 0 hour? Alan might have put it in there just now. Is there two questions? One there to Dave, then to Alan, and we'll go to Alan for summaries and check out. But basically, Dave, on your point, is there an exact web link that people can go to support Alex Sabell's motion there about electoral reform issue? And if that can be posted in the chat and we can get that out to people, it'd be good. And is there something for that, Dave? And then I'll come over to Alan.
I'll post the what I've just posted in the chat here onto the website, and the draft letter for people to send to their MPs.
You'll put that here in the chat, and we can check.
I've put the blurb in the chat. I'll put the blurb and the draft letter on the CEC website.
CEC WhatsApp,
yeah,
Momentum one. Okay, and we'll go to the main one. That's great. All right, so there it is, folks. There's some action to try and change the system there that you can take. Please network it. And as Hugh Montgomery said on his webinar, if you just tell 7 people about something, about changing their bank or whatever, those 7 tell another 7 tell another 7. We're getting exponential. So over to Alan, same question, and then we'll go to summaries. But is there a particular, you might have put in already, apologies, exact web link of how people can support this national, the latest bill, basically?
Yeah, I've just popped two links in. One, which is very simple, which is the petition to the Prime Minister, which includes meeting our international targets, backing the Nature and National Security Bill, and stopping Rosebank, and a separate link which ends N and NS, which is a tool for writing to your MP directly about the Nature and National Security Bill. So both
awesome.
Links are in the chat.
Right.
And yeah, they're designed to be one which is very clickable, and we're going to do a mass signature, and the second one, which is writing for your MP if you feel your MP is particularly open to if they are not just someone who might be a Reform MP that just blanks you.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll draw that to a conclusion there, folks. Please do put a comment or what you thought of the webinar tonight. Put 3 words or a sentence. We're collecting them for some testimonials to show the good work we do. But thank you. Just to come over to Alan for closing comments and everything. Thank you so much for coming, Alan, and for all the great work that 0 Hour has been doing to massively mobilise people on all your campaigns, and also particularly on the national emergency briefing. Phenomenal work. Keep it up, or many minds are with you. And thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom and campaign. So whatever the link is there, folks, follow it, knock it out, do it, and pass it on to 7 people. Over to you, Alan, for kind of parting comments. And I think you want to draw strands together, and we'll wrap it there. Over.
I'm going to do a bit of a rousing end. I want to start obviously by thanking you for having me here. But the rousing end is this feeling of there is a lot of momentum. And if you've been at people's emergency briefing screening, every time I'm in these calls, I realise there is people all across the country doing work, and MPs, because we have a team in Parliament, feel this pressure. So this moment of a change of government is the moment to keep exercising that pressure. It can feel, when you look at the media, like the debate is being lost and it's getting less prevalent, but actually the amount of people who are writing emails, just 0 hour alone, it's thousands each week. So so that means every MP is getting multiple emails just from us. And if you add Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth, all of the organizations doing great work, these MPs know that you care. And the more that we come together and collaborate, the more I think we have the chance to make this difference happen. There is barriers in the political system, but it is not insurmountable. We will get through this. So sometimes signing a petition, writing to your MP, you feel like I'm never going to get anywhere, but it's about the long game. And to plug Ron's book again, he really reinforces that point. He says, you will have many hurdles. And if you think that you're going to succeed in a month and 6 months, it will not. But he's like, I have passed legislation by being stubborn enough to keep pushing. So, and he's done it, and he's passed lots of legislation. So we've been here before, and we can surmount it.
Brilliant. Take action wherever you are. Thank you so much, Allan. Absolutely brilliant work. All right. Take care, folks, and save the chat and network it. Pass on to 7 people.